Well, welcome. Welcome everyone to Office Hours with Michael Kitces. So as you can see, I'm in a little bit of an unusual setup today. I'm actually hanging out here in Des Moines, Iowa. You are actually looking, that is the state capital of Iowa, right there in the background here. Hanging out for a keynote session tomorrow for the FPA Iowa chapter. But before I get started, I wanted to still get to our office hours today. We're a little bit later than usual, unfortunately, because I was speaking and then traveling during the usual time. But I wanted to talk a little today about the whole phenomenon of paying your dues. Because I find in the financial planning world in particular, we have lots of these discussions of whether someone should pay their dues, about whether they're putting in the hours and time. And I wanted to tackle this issue. So the particular question that kind of kicked off this week was from Charlie, and Charlie asked, I graduated in May with a degree in financial planning. Congratulations, Charlie. Passed my CFA exam this summer. Kudos again, Charlie. Now Charlie says, I'm searching for a financial planning job. I got an offer from what I thought was a great firm in the area, but they're requiring me to start out in operations doing paperwork, and I want to do financial planning. Why is it so hard to find a firm that doesn't have this pay your dues mentality? So I think this is a good question, Charlie, because the whole pay your dues mentality is definitely a challenge, right? This is the infamous, when I was young, I walked uphill in the snow both ways, so you should have to as well. And while I'm not really a fan of sort of like a pay your dues for the sake of paying your dues approach, I think sometimes it actually gets short shrift, and here's why. So let's step away a moment from the financial planning context, and I'm going to take another run. We're going to talk about sports instead. So when it comes to sports, some people out there, frankly, are just kind of natural athletes. They're pretty good at any sport they try. Others, including me, not so naturally inclined. Getting good at a sport is hard work. It's something that you train for. Now, nonetheless, like from my perspective as being someone that really grew up not an athlete, I was really proud that when I was in school, I actually played squash, played varsity squash for college for my last 2 years of college. It was a sport I really never played seriously or even tried until my sophomore year. And, for me, getting to play squash competitively was not one of those like, hey, I decide I'm going to do this and it worked. Like, simply put, I worked my ass off. Our team did practice drills, lunges and volley shots, and recoveries off the back wall, and stuff that you train and practice for in squash. So I did my drills, and not because I was paying my dues, it was because I was learning to play the game. And as I got better, I started doing pickup games with other people on the team so I could practice, and basically they'd beat me over and over and over again because I sucked, because I didn't know how to play the game very well yet. But I kept doing it over and over again, and it was might feel like I'm paying my dues while they beat me, but I was learning to play the game. And then eventually I was good enough that I earned the right to actually practice with the team. I got close to being on the competitive ladder. And so that just meant I got more on-court time, doing drills, playing scrimmages, and mostly still losing. But the point to all of it is that these weren't, to me, steps where I was paying my dues. This is learning to play the game. And, in the end, our team would practice a little over an hour a day, so I practice 3 hours a day. I do an hour of drills beforehand, then I practice with the team, then I do pickup games or scrimmage matches afterwards, just anything I could do to put in my time. And it wasn't because I was trying to pay my dues by doing that, or anyone that was demanding me to do it in order to pay my dues. It's because that's how you train. That's how you build a skill. That's how you get better at something. You have to practice it, do it, and learn to play the game. And when it comes to financial planning, I think there's very much of a direct parallel here. If you want to be a professional, you have to put in the time. And it's not really because you're paying your dues. It's because financial planning is a series of skills that you have to learn and hone over time. And you learn them by doing them over and over and over again. That's why we have, as Jay's saying, that's why we have apprenticeship style financial advisory programs. Frankly, that's why the CFP board built the apprenticeship rule. This is essentially, as Gary's saying, a version of the 10,000 hour rule, that you have to do it over and over again, not because you're paying your dues, because that's how you learn and train. I think that's really what we're seeing for the whole career progression for financial advisors now, is about learning the knowledge and the skills and then practicing them over and over again so that you can move up the line. So paraplanners learn technical competency, and then you move up, and once you master that, you learn empathy and client relationships, and then if you do well with that, you move up and you learn sales and business development as a senior advisor, and then some people move up further and learn management skills and take on other roles in the firm. But the point to it is that these aren't things where you're paying your dues as you go. These are skills you're learning where you have to take the time and put in the hours in order to learn to do it, because that's how skills get learned. That's how you get it done. And so in the context of Charlie's question, it's really very much the same thing. So Charlie, when you ask this question, should I take a job that's in an operations role even though you've completed the CFP educational requirement? My answer is yes, you should do it. And point of fact, I did the same thing. There was a period of time where I worked in an operations role even though I was done with my CFP education. I passed my exam. I was actually done with my CLU and most of my CHFC at that point as well. And again, this isn't because you should work in operations after you pass your CFP exam, because I did. The point is that this is a normal career progression. This is how it works. This is how it's supposed to work. You have to practice and learn skills before you can move up to the next level. Now, it's worth noting that even when I was in this operations role, I only did it for a period of time before I moved on. For me, it was a little under 2 years. When I started in the role, frankly, everything was fascinating and new. I didn't know the difference between ACAT transfers and non-ACAT transfers. I didn't know what it means when paperback comes back NIGO. I had to learn all of that. I had to do that. I had to experience it so that I know how it worked. I'd never gone through a life insurance application or an annuity application before. I was learning. That's what you do. Now, eventually, I outgrew my position. I guess you could say I finished paying my dues, but in essence, I learned the role and what I needed to learn so that I can move on as a professional. Now, ironically for me, this actually turned out to be a problem in the job I was in the company that I was in. I was in a firm that was really focused on doing financial planning. It was a great opportunity to learn hands-on financial planning, but the firm wasn't actually growing. It was a very financially successful firm. It was a very profitable firm, but it was not a growing business, which meant in essence, once I had paid my dues and I learned the role, I had to leave because there was nowhere else to go. There was nowhere left to move up. And that's not about a problem of paying your dues or this path. That's simply the acknowledgement that sometimes in the process of learning your skills, you may actually outgrow the position that you're at and you may need to move on and go somewhere else. And frankly, when I hear discussions of people paying their dues, the version of that worries me is not actually that you've got to put in the time to learn your job and become a better professional. It's when you get stuck in a dead-end job that isn't moving. And I think it's actually worth noting, like I notwithstanding this kind of statement that I'm making that you should pay your dues, because it's really not about paying your dues, it's about learning how to be a professional. There is a bad version of paying your dues. And the bad version of paying your dues is when you're stuck doing tasks that are really not relevant for your future training at all. So if you're stuck in a firm where you're just doing paperwork and filing and scanning documents, and so you're not even learning about how operations and transfers works, you're just moving paper around in the office. Those are not good tasks. That now we're a little too close to paying your dues and not so much in the constructive realm of really learning, because those are not really tasks for a professional track towards doing financial planning. So if you've got a boss that says do tasks that are just utterly and completely irrelevant to learning anything about the execution of a financial advisory firm, I think that's a problem. But frankly, that's a narrower situation. And even then, you've got to recognize that even a great job isn't fun stuff all the time. There are things that you have to do to get the job done. That happens in any job, no matter how amazing and awesome it otherwise feels. There's stuff you got to do. Frankly, when the firm owner founded the business, he or she was doing all of that paperwork and the filing and the planning and the clients and the copying, the scheduling, the appointments, and everything else that goes in between. And so that may be your task for a period of time as well. Again, that's not a paying your dues thing. That's a learning the job and doing what's got to get done to get a job executed. But the real issue is when you get stuck in a position where you're not learning, that to me is ultimately the moment where we're passing just paying your dues and learning, and we're into a trouble spot. And really, even then, it's less about being stuck in a pay your dues role, and it's more being stuck in a job that's not growing role. So getting back to Charlie's original question, kind of wrapping up here, Charlie, my advice to you, if you've already recognized that this is a good advisory firm, I'd encourage you to take this job. And don't view it as paying your dues, because you have got to go and do operations work for a year or two, even though you were trained to be a financial planner. It means recognize that a part of what it means to be a good financial planner is that you have to actually know how the paperwork works and how accounts transfer and how this stuff gets done. So if you go into that role and you're there after 2 years and you've mastered it and now you can't figure out where to go next, that's a problem. But that's a road that's a bridge you can cross when you get to it. Maybe you'll get there and find out the firm has grown to the point where there are other opportunities. Maybe you'll get to that point and find out that now it's time to leave because you got the job, you learned the tasks, you weren't paying the dues, but you learned the tasks, and now you're ready to move on to the next thing. But even then, I would still take the job. If you're at a good firm that's planning focus, it's a great opportunity to get the experience and learn. Later, you can decide what comes next in your career. That's why my number one recommendation for any financial planner still coming in the industry is get a job. Because anything you do that's attached to the advisory industry is going to start that learning process. So you can figure out what you like, what you don't like, what you want to move on and do next, and you will learn skills that are relevant. Because frankly, when you're new and you're coming in fresh, there's a whole lot to learn. So I hope that helps us some food for thought around this whole idea of paying your dues. And the bottom line is I really want you to think differently about the whole concept of paying your dues. When you're a professional, when you're training for an advanced skill set, paying your dues is not just a thing you do for putting in your time. Paying your dues is how you learn and practice a skill. It's how you get to the infamous 10,000 hours for mastery. It's how any expert trains. It's how athletes train. It's how professionals train. So if you get to a point where you're moving along and you hit a wall and you can't advance, that becomes a problem, but that's not a pay your dues problem. That's maybe it's time to find a new job or a new firm where you have more opportunities to grow. So I hope that's helpful food for thought. Thanks for hanging out with me here at the Iowa State Capitol. This is Office Hours with Michael Kitces, Tuesdays, 1 p.m. East Coast time. Thanks for joining us, even at this late hour, and have a great day, everyone. Take care.